Pay attention to Alana Odysseus, 23 years old, standing outside her own front door in the chill of a London summer night, locked out in nothing but her dressing gown. The time is just past midnight on July 22, 2024. Her neighbor's CCTV camera captures a moment of quiet desperation as she turns and walks alone down Station Road in Walthamstow, barefoot, seeking help or just a moment of peace. She has less than 3 hours left to live. Inside the flat she's just been shut out from, Shaine March, 46, is pacing. A kitchen knife sits in a drawer. A lifetime of violence, once contained by prison walls, is about to erupt for a second time. This vulnerable walk would be her last moment of relative safety before a betrayal of ultimate violence. A final act that would leave her toddler an orphan and a family shattered by a grief beyond measure. This is the story of a 4-month relationship that became a death sentence. A single night of brutality that would expose the catastrophic failure of a second chance. And a legal reckoning that asked if some men are beyond redemption. Alana Odysseus lived at 58 The Grange on Lynmouth Road in Walthamstow, East London. At 23, she was, in her sister Jasmine's words, a bright, loud, loving woman who filled a room with music and laughter. She loved to dance, adored music, and her entire world was her 2-year-old daughter, Victoria. But Alana's life was also marked by profound loss and vulnerability. Victoria's father, Alana's former partner Ruslan, had died by suicide, a tragedy that left her grieving and raising her daughter alone. Recently, she had discovered a new source of both hope and anxiety. She was pregnant again, roughly 7 to 8 weeks along. For about 4 months, Alana had been in a relationship with Shaine March. To the outside world, it might have looked like a new beginning, but within her inner circle, a terrifying reality was unfolding. Alana had confided in her sisters and friends about Shaine's controlling and abusive behavior. She spoke of physical assaults and emotional manipulation. She was afraid of him, yet tragically, she still loved him. She held on to a fragile hope that he could change. On the evening of July 21st, just hours before her death, this fear and hope collided in a WhatsApp exchange with her sister Jasmine. Alana messaged that she felt unwell, that Shaine was acting up, and expressed her primary fear, her need to protect Victoria. Her final, devastating text to her sister laid her soul bare. "Can't help who you love, but he don't love any of us." She dressed for bed that night, unaware she was putting on the clothes in which she would be murdered. That same Sunday evening, Shaine March was in Alana's flat. On paper, Shaine seemed like a man who had been rehabilitated. Released from a life sentence for a $2,000 murder, he had been living in the community on lifetime license since February 2018, over 6 years without a recorded offense. He was 46, under probation supervision, and had a history of a traumatic brain injury suffered at age 17, which affected his cognition and emotional regulation. His lawyers would later speak of his mental health struggles, including depression and an antisocial personality disorder. But beneath this surface of a monitored, unwell man lived something else entirely: a documented killer. At age 21, Shaine March had traveled to a McDonald's on Denmark Hill, armed with a knife, to confront a group of boys he believed had robbed his friends. There, he stabbed 17-year-old Andre Drummond in the neck, a fatal injury. He claimed self-defense, but a jury convicted him of murder. He served 13 years. After his release, his violence immediately resurfaced. He was recalled to prison in 2013 for stamping on the belly of a different pregnant partner. This was a man for whom extreme violence was a proven, repeated tool. He had kept this darkness in check for 6 years. But on this night, In an argument over something as trivial as a pair of trainers, he would finally let it out again, with apocalyptic fury. The atmosphere in the flat on Lynmouth Road turned toxic that night. Neighbors heard a prolonged, vicious row between a man and a woman escalating through the walls. Shaine was so consumed by the argument, he recorded parts of it on his own phone. The fight, witnesses said, seemed to be about a pair of trainers. Shaine's voice was heard shouting abuse, Alana's voice pleading and apologizing. At one point, references to her pregnancy cut through the shouts, a chilling detail that would later take on horrific significance. The row spilled outside when Alana, in her distress, stepped out and found herself locked out. Shaine refused to let her back into her own home, where Victoria slept. A nearby CCTV camera captured the haunting image. Alana, alone in her dressing gown, walking down Station Road toward Lynmouth Road just after midnight. This would be the last footage of her alive, a portrait of vulnerability in the empty night. At some point in the next 2 hours, Alana was back inside the flat. What happened next was a storm of violence so excessive it defied comprehension. Shaine March went to the kitchen, took a 24-centimeter-long kitchen knife, and attacked the pregnant woman he claimed to love. He did not stab her once in a blind rage. He stabbed her at least 19 separate times. He slashed or cut her at least 5 more times. The assault was prolonged, moving, and merciless. The forensic evidence painted a scene of pure horror. Consultant forensic pathologist Dr. Matthew Chica would find 23 sharp force injuries in total. Several stab wounds were delivered with such severe, focused force that the knife penetrated through bone, including ribs and a vertebra. At least 5 of these wounds were individually fatal. A 6th likely was as well. This was not a loss of control. It was a determined annihilation. The wounds also told the story of Alana's desperate fight for her life and the life of her unborn child. She suffered classic defensive injuries on her hands and arms, deep slashes and stabs as she raised them to shield herself. Stab wounds to her legs were consistent with her being on the ground, kicking out weakly as he stood over her, continuing his attack. Her blood was found throughout the flat and outside, indicating the violence moved as she tried to escape. Just before 3 a.m., neighbors were alerted by the commotion. They found Alana outside on Lynmouth Road, collapsed and bleeding from the multitude of horrific wounds. In her final moments of consciousness, with a clarity that would forever haunt those who heard it, she used her last strength to name her killer. She pointed at Shaine March, who was seen calmly walking away, and cried out to her neighbors, "Shaine stabbed me! He stabbed me!" 2 neighbors, acting in unison, dialed 999 at 2:58 a.m., seconds apart. Despite their frantic efforts and the rapid arrival of paramedics within minutes, Alana Odysseus' life could not be saved. She was pronounced dead at 3:52 a.m. Inside the flat, her 2-year-old daughter Victoria slept on, unharmed, but now an orphan. The tiny, nascent life within Alana, a child roughly the size of a blueberry, was also extinguished. After the attack, Shaine March embarked on a cold, methodical mission to cover his tracks, captured on CCTV and witnessed by residents. He walked away from the scene, discarding the murder weapon, his blood-stained clothing, a small rucksack, and other items from Alana's flat. He dropped 3 mobile phones down a drain on a nearby road. He then wandered the streets of Walthamstow for over an hour, a man seemingly disconnected from the horror he had just perpetrated. Around 4:20 a.m., he entered a Creams Cafe on Church Hill. The lone worker there would later recount how Shaine, in a moment of bizarre confession, mumbled something to him about stabbing or killing his wife who has baby. Terrified, the worker called the police. Officers arrived just before 5 a.m. and arrested Shaine without resistance. Upon arrest, he made several stark admissions, saying, "I did it, I killed her," and "I stabbed her to death." In the police car, captured on body-worn video, he made further comments about the incident and his relationship with Alana. But his most detailed, damning confession was yet to come. Remanded in custody at HMP Belmarsh, Shaine was waiting for a bail hearing via video link. He was in the care of a prison officer. Unprompted, Shaine began to talk. He told the officer he had killed his partner. He gave a detailed account. The argument over the trainers, seeing red in the kitchen, grabbing the knife. He chillingly recounted Alana's dying words to him. Please stop, you have murdered me." Crucially, he told the officer about disposing of 3 phones down a drain, a direct clue that led police to recover one of them. On that phone, they found 2 unsent voice notes Shaine had recorded after the killing. One was addressed to his probation officer, the other to his mother. In both, he admitted to the murder.
"I just killed someone and I need to go back to jail. Mom, I just killed a woman and I'm going back to jail."
Shaine March was charged with murder. At his trial in October 2025, he initially pleaded guilty only to manslaughter, claiming diminished responsibility due to his traumatic brain injury and mental disorders. The prosecution case was formidable. The eyewitness accounts, the CCTV, the forensic pathology, the blood evidence, his own multiple confessions to neighbors, police, and the prison officer. The pathologist confirmed the pregnancy and the sheer overkill of the attack. Faced with this mountain of evidence, the defense crumbled. Dr. Marzio Acione, the neuropsychologist hired by Shaine's own team, conducted a final review of the evidence. He revised his opinion, concluding Shaine was not suffering from an abnormality of mental functioning sufficient for a diminished responsibility defense at the time of the murder. With his key expert testimony withdrawn, Shaine March had no leg to stand on. After the prosecution closed its case, he changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to the murder of Alana Odysseus. The sentencing hearing was where the full weight of the crime and Shaine's life were measured. Alana's family, her father Alan, mother Karen, and sisters Lorraine, Tara, and Jasmine, delivered victim personal statements that moved the courtroom to tears. They spoke of a vibrant, kind, protective sister and daughter, a devoted mother whose love for Victoria was her defining feature. They spoke of a void that could never be filled, of music and laughter replaced by silence. Tara described Alana as a kind, caring, funny, and deeply protective person. The judge acknowledged their grief was unfathomable, and that no sentence could reflect the value of Alana's life. The judge was then tasked with an immense decision. Shaine March was already a convicted murderer on life license. The guidelines were clear. A previous murder conviction meant the starting point for consideration was a whole life order, a sentence meaning he would die in prison. The judge weighed the exceptionally high seriousness. A domestic, coercively controlling relationship, the murder of a pregnant woman, the use of a knife, excessive violence, the presence of a child, and the prior murder. Yet, citing Shaine's traumatic brain injury, his ultimate guilty plea, and the 24-year gap between murders, the judge decided this was not one of the rarest and clearest cases for a whole life term. However, the judge stated the seriousness was particularly high. The statutory starting point was a minimum term of 30 years. Then came the aggravating factors, which the judge said very heavily outweigh the available mitigation. The list was long and damning. 1. A previous conviction for murder. 2. Murder of a pregnant woman with at least one stab wound aimed toward her reproductive organs. 3. Sustained, prolonged, and excessively brutal violence, 19 stab wounds, 5 slashes. 4. Use of a knife. 5. Controlling and coercive behavior during the relationship. 6. The offense committed in the victim's home, a place of trust. 7. The presence of her toddler during the attack. 8. Disposal of evidence afterward. 9. His history of assaulting a previous pregnant partner. The mitigation was scant. His brain injury, his late guilty plea, and his lack of recent offending. The judge meticulously explained that given the sheer weight of aggravation, the sentence had to be significantly increased above the 30-year starting point. On the day of sentencing, Shaine March, now 47, stood to hear his fate. For the murder of Alana Odysseus, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 42 years. The judge was blunt about its meaning. Given your age and the length of the minimum term I must impose, it may be that you will never be released from prison. He would be 89 years old before the parole board could even consider his release. Even then, release would not be guaranteed, and he would be on license for life. Furthermore, he was immediately recalled to continue serving the original life sentence for the 2000 murder of Andre Drummond. The 42-year term would begin only after that recall period was served, a virtual guarantee of death behind bars. Today, Shaine March is in a high-security prison, serving 2 life sentences that effectively form one endless stretch. The legal system's experiment in rehabilitating a convicted murderer ended on the floor of a Walthamstow flat in a pool of a young mother's blood. Alana's daughter Victoria grows up without her mother, her father, and the sibling she never knew. She is raised by family, carrying a loss she is too young to understand. Alana's parents and sisters endure a grief that reshapes every day of their lives, haunted by the final text messages and the knowledge of her terror. The case stands as a grim testament to several harsh truths: the lethal potential of coercive control, the unique horror of knife crime in domestic settings, and the profound challenge of managing dangerous offenders on life license. It raises agonizing questions about risk assessment, probation oversight, and whether some patterns of violence are so entrenched they defy rehabilitation. Most hauntingly, it is a story of echoes. A man who killed with a knife at 21 was given a chance to live a normal life. 24 years later, presented with conflict, he reached for a knife again. The target was different, but the mechanism was identical. Alana Odysseus was not just in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was in the path of a historical trajectory of violence that the justice system failed to intercept. The investigation demonstrated the crucial role of community, the neighbors who called 999, the cafe worker who alerted police, and the undeniable power of forensic evidence and a killer's own careless confessions. Alana's family continues to honor her memory, ensuring Victoria knows who her mother was. They want the world to remember that Alana was more than a statistic of domestic homicide. She was a vibrant soul, a loving mother, a daughter and sister whose light was brutally and needlessly snuffed out. She trusted a man she loved, and that trust became her death sentence. No one deserves such a fate. The flat on Lynmouth Road is silent now, but in Walthamstow, in the hearts of her family, and in the annals of a justice system forced to confront its own limitations, the memory of Alana Odysseus and the devastating cost of Shaine March's second chance will never fade.